Okay, welcome everyone. Okay, this is the first lecture video for the course PNG Politics 4.15502 for external students in PNG Open Campus. Okay, so for today's session, what I'm planning to do is to cover Unit 1 and 2. Unit 1 from this textbook. Okay, the Unit 1 is titled Competing Theories of Colonialism, and Unit 2 Colonialism in Papua New Guinea. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to title this lecture Colonialism and its Dimensions. So more or less Unit 1 and Unit 2 talks about similar themes, okay, and these themes can be understood through the three dimensions, okay, mentioned in the book, textbook. Colonialism, political, and economic. Okay, the dimensions. For this lecture, the reading will be taken out of the book titled Development and Dependency by Azim Amish, Kenneth Good, and Rex Mortimer. Okay, this book is published in, let's see, the year probably in the 1980s, 1979. And it's a very good book because it provides the context of colonialism, history of colonialism, colonial policy, basically the basic PNG politics, okay, from the classical or the colonial period up until the independence. The particular chapter that we will be focusing on is chapter 2, titled Plantation System. Okay, so this particular chapter captures both economic, political, and the colonial dimension through the plantation system. Okay, so let's move on. The lecture outline. Okay, let me put this. So the lecture. Okay, so the lecture outline. Okay, I'm going to go through the introduction. Okay, we're going to talk about the colonial dimension, the political dimension, and the economic dimension. So these three dimensions here will be covered, okay, in the context of colonialism in Papua and New Guinea. Okay. So as a way to kickstart the discussion, this is the map of contemporary or current Papua New Guinea. Okay, the map is not inclusive or does not include the province of Jiwaka and Hela, which recently came on. So that map is probably as old around the year 2010. Okay, but the idea is this is the map of Papua New Guinea as we know it today. This is the colonial map. Okay, we have the highland itself. Is divided into three. Okay, more so you have the Dutch taking care of West Papua, and then for our case, Papua New Guinea, the north tip was once occupied by the German occupation. Okay, and the British protectorate. Later, the northern part of Papua New Guinea, Momase region and New Guinea Islands, was transferred to the British or the colonial control after World War I. Okay. So what do we know about PNG or Papua New Guinea? Okay, to begin with, okay, we live before colonialism. Papua New Guinea was fragmented, okay, and was composed of various tribes and clans, okay, well over 1,000 tribes and 800 different languages. So it was fragmented, okay. So the idea is that there's never been a nation, okay, called Papua New Guinea to begin with, okay. So Papua New Guinea prior to 1884 was stateless, not until 1949, which both territories, called the Mandated Territory, Papua New Guinea, came to be, or united as Papua and New Guinea, and then 1975, where Papua New Guinea got its independence. Okay, so we may call it Papua New Guinea is an artificial construct created by the process of colonialism and the dictates of global politics. Okay. Now let's look at the first dimension, colonialism. So what is colonialism? Well, colonialism, you can say, is the process by which dominant power extends its influence and control over foreign territories. Now, how does that happen? Let's say in the developed democracies or developed West, industrial revolution came around in the 16th century, and through the process of industrial revolution, there was a need for raw materials. Okay, and that led to various colonial powers extend their boundaries overseas. Okay, occupied territories, and that acts as a basis to extract these raw materials out. Okay, so again here in point number 2, it was used by Western countries to search for raw materials, markets, and other materials and other reasons. Okay, the popular theme was the 3Gs: the gold, God, and glory. Okay, colonial extension gained momentum after the rise of industrial revolution, as I mentioned. Okay, and colonialism was the process through which Papua New Guinea was formally integrated into the global political and economic system. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that colonialism introduced Papua New Guinea into this integrated global and economic system, and it's important because colonialism played a way, okay, for the other two dimensions to come in, okay, the political and economic dimensions. Okay, and let's look at the political dimension. Okay, here, okay, let me give a brief history on the history of democracy. But as you see in the two triangles here, one is the upright triangle, one is the upside down triangle. Basically, the triangle tries to paint a picture of where political power lies. Okay, in most representative democracies in the West, political power lies with the people. Now, the path towards representative democracy started in 1215 through the Magna Carta or the Magna Charta. And there is these issues between the people and the king, so the feudal structure, where that piece of document started to negotiate power. Okay, until the birth of representative democracy, especially the French Revolution in France, and for our case, the Glorious Revolution in Great Britain. Okay, the Glorious Revolution, I think in 1776. I'm not entirely sure about the date, but the Glorious Revolution set forth the idea, the birth of representative democracy, where the people wanted a kind of political system or structure that represents the views and the wishes of the people. So through representative democracy, you can see in the upright triangle where it says Westminster system, the British Parliament, the people sort of created a system. Hence, the political power resides within the people. The people creates the parliament, okay, the legislature, and the legislature make laws, okay, and legislature create institutions. Okay, this is not so in countries that came after, let's say, in the 1960s, called the third wave democracies. Okay, so the countries that adopt democracy went through a process of what they call democratization. Okay, in most democratization process hinges on the idea of institutionalization. Okay, where institutions were created first before elections, and this parliament, legislature. Okay, and people were forced, or people were introduced to this idea of representative democracy. Okay, so in Papua New Guinea's Westminster case, Papua New Guinea was introduced to the idea of representative democracy, starting in 1884 when colonialism came in. Okay, German occupation, British occupation, the protectorate. Okay, from that not so until 1949 when Papua and New Guinea became the mandated territory, okay, uniting into one. Okay, in your textbook you would have seen, okay, there are instances of, okay, dates of, let's say, 1951 where the first legislative council was formed, 1964 the first House of Assembly, 1968, 1972, okay, before independence. So these political structures were introduced, okay, before elections or legislature or elections came in. Okay, so you can see in PNG institutions as you go up, parliament, legislature, and the people. So in this illustration here, the rule of thumb is as you go up, the political power declines. Okay, so the basis of political power highlighted in green for representative democracy, mostly those developed democracies in Europe, lies with the people. And in our case in Papua New Guinea, the political power lies with the institutions, because institutions created the legislature passed laws, okay, and the people, the notion of state was introduced later to the people. So as you go up, you can see that in our case, political power lies with the institution. So it's common in Papua New Guinea where a member of parliament or a top bureaucrat, when he or she is alleged to have been implicated in allegations of corruption, okay, normally what he would do in other developed representative democracies, let's say in Britain, that particular public figure would resign from office and let due process takes place. This is not so in Papua New Guinea, where the leader or the public figure usually runs to the courts first before resigning from office. So that speaks highly of where political power lies. Okay, so the political dimension, if we can go, introduce us to this centralized authority. Okay, so colonialization came in. Okay, colonialization came in and it introduced, okay, 1949. Okay, it introduced Papua New Guinea to decentralized authority. Okay, what is decentralized authority? So centralized authority, okay, so in a stateless society where power was diffused and loyalties were, in our case, to clans and tribes, okay, the imposition of central authority was the primary task of maintaining control. So British protectorate was declared in Papua region. Not later that was extended to more or less the Momase region. Okay, so the idea was to create a centralized authority to administer the mandated territory. So what did they do? Okay, one objective was to decentralize the presence of bureaucracy, appointment of figures who adjudicate on colonial versions of law. So you see the role of Luluwais tools, patrol officers back in the 60s or more or less 50s, 40s, okay, become important to execute decentralized authority. So when you see a patrol officer going into a village, so to speak, the patrol officer carries the role of a lawyer, okay, health officer, okay, land officer. All those institutional roles of a political structure is embedded into the persona of the patrol officer. Okay, and later we saw the creation of local councillors, okay, the Luluwais tools, for example. So that is the structure that was introduced to the colonial, this structure that was introduced to the mandated territory before independence. Okay, let's move on. The establishment of a coercive and policing arm of the state, the arm of the state that enforce and enable necessary allegiance to the new authority. Accompanying the roles of patrol officers, there was a need to maintain police presence, and that led to the establishment of a policing unit in the colonial, mandated colonial state. That is where you see a lot of prominent public figures today, their grandparents, okay, were more or less police officers, and that is throughout Papua New Guinea as well. Okay. Now this is the colonial structure or the political structure that was introduced, the dimension that was introduced and later adopted. Okay. Most of the structure is still present today in our political system. Okay. So formally, the institutional structure, you have the administrator on top, which was usually known as the role of the governor. Okay. And then you have the executive, legislative, and the public service. This structure was introduced in 1949, okay, and said by 1951 the Legislative Council. So we have a centralized authority structure at the top, the governor, and then we have this sort of the executive, legislative, and the public service, a semi-Westminster model, you can say, okay, operating under the administrator or the governor. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, okay, through colonialism, Papua New Guinea was introduced to this political structure, the Westminster system or model of government. Okay, now that was carried on after independence. Okay, let's look at the next dimension, which is the economic dimension. Now, to understand that dimension, we know there are two powers, occupied the Papua New Guinea territory, formerly the Germans on the north and the Papua on the south. Okay, now German protectorate, remained under the New Guinea Company from 1884 to 1889. After 1889, the protectorate came under the German state. Okay, the protectorate, did not include the present-day Bougainville, and other outlying islands such as Mortlock and the Tasman Atoll groups. These atoll were part of Solomon Islands, which goes as far as Santa Isabella between 1886 and 1889. New Guinea up until the 1940s, this was a case of a classical colony. What do I mean by classical colony? There is a presence of a trading station, a plantation station, and you can say a structure to that classical colony, where it is built for exploitation, or it is built to export raw materials to the center, which is the German. So by 1970s, German companies were trading with New Britain archipelago. German had also had its presence in Samoa. So there is some an interested, let's say, economic activity between the region up until to Momase region and the New Guinea Islands. German was after that. German annexed New Guinea during the scramble for colonies in the 1880s. A consortium of powerful business interests in Berlin played an important role in establishing the German New Guinea Company. So after that, through the New Guinea Company, so the establishment of German plantation. The company engaged in cocoa, copra, tobacco, and coffee. During the time, the cultivation plantation area rose from 6,000 acres in 1889 to 38,000 acres in 1907. It stood about 85,000 acres, almost double of that in comparison to Papua. So, German company developed sufficient base for economic growth, however, was affected by shortage of laborers. The company arranged to import Malay, Javanese, and Chinese to address the shortage of labor. So what I'm saying here is that there is an interest in the New Guinea region. There was a genuine German interest in developing the economic base of the Momase region and the islands, all in the view to export raw materials back to Germany. That is not the case for the Papuan region. So So Papua from 1880s to 1840s, the case of lethargic colony. So why there is, let's say, a lack of uninterested economic development in Papua, despite the British British protectorate, okay, on the Papuan region. Okay, this is partly due to the establishment of the settler colony, which is Australia, in 1788. So, but during that time, Queensland was economically a backward state. Okay, does any, let's say, any development challenging Queensland would be detrimental towards Queensland economic growth. Now, after 1788, okay, New South Wales or Sydney was the industrial hub of the new colony state. Okay, Queensland was the agriculture or the backward state, for that matter. So up until 1901, the policy was to best address the lack of development in Queensland. Okay, so emphasis was to bring Queensland up on par, on speed, to meet or to be at the same pace in with Sydney. Now that has an effect on the protectorate territory of Papua. So any development, economic development in the Papuan region will affect Queensland's economy. Okay, an example is the sugarcane plantation. So the British had already established a sugarcane plantation in Fiji. Okay, and Queensland had a sugarcane plantation. Okay, the fun fact is, okay, there are instances of the sugarcane plant seeds, okay, being brought over to Queensland, okay, originating from Papua New Guinea. So what I'm saying there is the lack of development, economic development in the Papuan region, okay, has to do with how the Queensland economy is situated. Okay, so let's continue. So high cost of engaging in any economic activities in Papua, in part due to the political economic state of Queensland, which was a backward state, okay, during those times, less favorable ecological environment that affected agricultural development. So there were two instances why there was a lack in economic activity in the Papuan region. One is the unfavorable ecological environment, and secondly, in part due to Queensland's economic situation. Now, one such example is the Navigation Act of not 1929 but 1921, okay, where that act, okay, came about and runs, I think, for 8 years, 1921 to 1928. So any export, okay, any economic development or any export that was supposed export directly to the international market from Papua region, okay, that act sort of state that any shipment coming out from Papua must report to Sydney before being exported to overseas. Okay, and also the White Australian policy, okay, where it limits, okay, poses a measure on the indigenous. Okay, so the Australian policy limits any economical development in the Papuan region. So such policy, the Australian white policy, also restrict, let's say, Australians investors to come in, okay, and invest in Papua region as well. Okay. So the plantation system was and is an exploitative system, okay, under the colonial arrangement. It is not fared well in other countries around the world. Okay, the plantation system is labor intensive, as in the case of German New Guinea. Shortage of laborers resulted in blackbearding and arrival of indentured laborers from the Asian region. Unequal wage conditions, mostly young men, were recruited with less favorable terms. The plantations have monopolized the best lands, and some lands were misallocated in producing low-value commodity that is not competitive in the international markets. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that although there are interest of economic activity in the German occupied territory, and later British took over after World War One, and also there were some economic activity in the Papuan region. The issues that were faced during that time was there was shortage of labor, okay, and the unequal treatment to wage conditions during the time also affected, okay, the economic plantations or the plantations, and also results in low value commodity being exported, okay, and that affects, you know, the plantation system, profitability of those plantation system itself. However, the presence of plantation system as, okay, introduced Papua New Guinea, okay, the people to, let's say, production of cash crops for income, okay, and the idea of entrepreneurship amongst our locals. Okay. Okay, so, well, yes, okay, wages and profits generated from plantation production tend to dissipate into import consumption rather than leading into domestic production of consumer goods. Colonial administration derived most of its internal revenue from import duties on manufactured goods. It was not in the best interest of the state to favor industrialization. The metropolitan governments also restricted the growth of industries within the colonies in order to protect their own. For example, while Australia provided preferential treatment for the Papua's rubber, it discouraged the development of sugar and coconut oil-based margarine industry for fear that it will affects Australia's dairy products. Okay, so these are the wages, the labor, shortage of labor, and also the Queensland economy, presence of Queensland Australia economy also that sort of affected the economic development under the colonial era. Okay. Then on the flip side, it introduced Papua New Guinea to cash crop and income cash crop economies, so to speak. Okay. So in the conclusion, okay, what have we discussed so far? Okay, we talked about the colonial dimension that introduced Papua New Guinea to the international world system. Okay, in various parts, okay, political and economic. It was the colonialism that led to the establishment of Papua and New Guinea territories under two different powers, the German, okay, up until World War One. After World War One, the British took over. Now, it was economic dimension that introduced indigenous Papua New Guineans to the idea of cash crop economy, more so in the once occupied German protectorate. Okay, it was not in the case of Papua protectorate due to the presence of the Australian colony during that time. Okay, and then we have political dimension that introduced the idea of representative democracy to Papua New Guinea. So that basically covers Unit 1 and Unit 2. Unit 1, okay, here talks about competing theories of colonialism, and Unit 2 here talks about colonialism and Papua New Guinea. Okay, so here in this discussion, or the lecture discussion, we've tried to capture most of the themes in Unit 1 and Unit 2 through the presentation of the three dimensions here. Colonialism, but the two most important themes are economic dimension and political dimension. Okay, economic more so provided a pathway to political dimensions. Okay, so with that, this will end the lecture for today, and I will continue on discussing lectures, I believe 3 and 4 in the next lecture video. Okay, with that, thank you.